Cast your minds back a couple of seasons, and Aston Villa were fighting for their Premier League lives with everything they had. A couple of years further back, and they were plying their trade in the Championship. So, what changed? Well, most people put it down to the stellar job their manager Unai Emery has done since his arrival. So stay tuned as we discuss the return of Emery and how he's turned things around at Villa. First up, to understand where Villa are, let's take a look at where they've been. To English football fans of a certain age, Aston Villa represents one of the old guard. Perennial challengers in the 1990s, the team from the Midlands are actually England's 6th most successful club, which should give you younger viewers a better idea of just how big they actually are. Although their golden period was at the turn of the century, no, not the last one, the one before, Villa have provided glimpses of quality over the years and have always, with the odd exception, fielded decent teams. Arguably their best period in modern history came via that Peter With team of the early 1980s. The Birmingham outfit won the league in 1981 and followed that up with a European Cup glory the following season, as With again provided the goals, including the only goal in the final as the Villians overcame the mighty Bayern Munich. Unfortunately, since those heady days, the Villa faithful have had to settle for the odd slither of success, mixed in with plenty of mediocrity. The mid-90s provided a bit of relief in the form of a couple of League Cup triumphs, but since then, it has been slim pickings for the inhabitants of the Holt End. The mid-2010s saw one of the worst teams in Aston Villa history take to the pitch at Villa Park, which resulted in the once proud boys from Brum limping over the line in 20th place. It has since been argued that relegation could possibly have been the best thing for them, as they were able to get rid of a lot of dead wood and start over. Promotion and Premier League survival followed, and under Unai Emery right now, Villa are actually beginning to flourish. Which brings us onto the Spaniard himself. Born in Spain's Basque Country in 1971, Emery's playing career was, well, unremarkable. After just 5 games for Real Sociedad, he found himself at Deportivo Toledo, where he spent the majority of his career. After retiring at Lorca Deportiva in 2004, he soon found himself in the managerial hot seat, taking Lorca up to the 2nd division for the first time in their history. Of course, this didn't go unnoticed, and after just missing out on promotion to La Liga, in swooped Almeria. This time, Emery was able to secure promotion to the top division, and Spanish football had a bright young manager on their hands. The talented coach then spent 4 years at Valencia, guiding them back to the top table of European football, before an ill-fated switch to Spartak Moscow. He lasted just 6 months in Russia before being handed whatever the Russian version of a P45 is, following a string of poor results. However, Spartak's loss was Sevilla's gain, and Emery's appointment to Roman Sanchez Pizjuan ushered a new wave of dominance in Europe's secondary competition, the Europa League. Under his guidance, Sevilla won, quite incredibly, 3 Europa League titles in a row, which automatically meant he was being spoken about for some of the bigger jobs in Europe. Emery took the reins at PSG in 2016, but would unfortunately only last 2 seasons. He would pick up 7 trophies during his time at the Parc des Princes, including 1 league title and 2 Coupe de France wins. However, he was in charge for arguably PSG's biggest failure in recent years, as Barcelona overhauled a 4-goal deficit in the second leg of their Champions League tie to win 6-1. The following season, Emery was on the move again as he parted company with the French outfit, landing on English shores. Next up, we're discussing his first spell in England. There is a common misconception that Unai Emery's time in charge of Arsenal was riddled with failure. He was appointed boss of the Gunners in May 2018, becoming the first Arsenal manager of the post-Arsene Wenger era. Of course, given what his French predecessor had achieved over the previous 22 years, Emery was up against it from the start. And the fixture computer wasn't kind either. Arsenal started the 2018-19 season with back-to-back defeats to Manchester City and Chelsea, with some Gunners fans writing their new Spanish boss off almost immediately. He did manage to turn it around though, taking the North Londoners on their best run in over a decade, as they recorded 11 wins in a row. All told, that particular run would see them go 22 unbeaten, which for a manager in his first season with a squad of players who he'd never worked with before was quite an achievement. Unfortunately for Emery and Arsenal though, the team only picked up 4 points from their final 5 league games, which wasn't enough for Champions League qualification. To make matters even worse, they were pipped to 4th place by bitter rivals Tottenham Hotspur. This capitulation was too much for fans of the club, and although Emery had taken them to the Europa League final, Of course, the writing was arguably on the wall. Defeat in said final to Chelsea and a poor start to the following season meant Emery was, unfairly for some, given his marching orders. The Spaniard spent the next few months out of the game before attempting to salvage his reputation with Villarreal, which he managed with aplomb. Emery guided the Yellow Submarine to the Champions League semi-final, but unfortunately came up against a rampant Liverpool side. Of course, his stint with Villarreal confirmed what we all knew all along, that Unai Emery is one of the top managerial talents in Europe, which Aston Villa was soon to find out. Let's look at his start to life at Villa now. When the Villa board decided to relieve Dean Smith of his position in November 2021, they decided to go with one of the game's most talked about young managers in Steven Gerrard, who was fresh off lifting the Scottish Premiership with Rangers. Unfortunately, it didn't go to plan, and Gerrard was sacked after less than a year in the role after one of the worst cases of Premier League players downing tools in recent memory. Villa were at a crossroads. Did they go for another up-and-comer or an old head? Well, they settled on somewhere in between, as Unai Emery was handed the chance to redeem himself after his first spell at Arsenal had ended so acrimoniously. And it's safe to say he has been a revelation. When he took over back in October, Villa was sitting in 16th position, just a point above the relegation zone. Fast forward 6 months, and they are now posing a very real threat of gate-crashing the top 4 and securing Champions League football next year. Of course, you don't simply become a bad manager overnight, and it's probably fair to say that Unai Emery suffered from the instant gratification culture that has become synonymous with bigger clubs and their fans. For all Arsene Wenger's good points, he didn't leave Arsenal in a good position when he called it a day, and Emery had a lot of leaks to plug when he turned up in North London. So, to give him just over a year to try and turn things around simply wasn't fair. Arsenal were a shell of their former selves back in 2018, and teams knew they could simply bully them. To expect anyone to sort a mess like that out in just one season borders on disgraceful, to be brutally honest. So, how has he turned things around at Villa Park? Unai Emery is one of that rare breed of manager who has the ability to turn good players into great ones. If we look through the Villa squad right now, it's basically the same players who let Steven Gerrard down so badly. Emery has instilled a confidence in these players, the likes of which hasn't been seen at Villa Park arguably since Dean Saunders and Dalian Atkinson strutted their stuff in the early 90s. His ability to get a tune out of players like Tyrone Mings, who was reportedly one of the leading figures in the betrayal of Gerrard, is testament to the man. He has also been instrumental in the resurgence of Ollie Watkins. Eyebrows were raised when Villa parted with £28 million to bring him in from Brentford a couple of years back. But that investment is beginning to reap its rewards. Emery has turned Watkins into one of the most dangerous strikers in the division, and Villa will have a struggle on their hands to keep their main man at Villa Park this summer. Emery's tactical nous is second to none too. Usually favouring a methodical, patient build-up, Emery has the ability to mix things up when needed. This was clearly on display recently as Villa dominated Newcastle at home, comfortably seeing off the tune 3-0. Emery decided to abandon his normal style, and instead of playing out from the back and encouraging the high press from Newcastle, which they've been so effective at this season, he instructed his keeper, Emi Martinez, to adopt a more direct style. Villa captain John McGinn said it best on TalkSport recently, explaining that Emery has helped him rediscover his form. He said, "Every day I'm learning different things from him and trying to bring my qualities to the game. He's given us all a lot of belief." Villa look primed for European football next year, and with someone with the Europa League pedigree of Emery at the helm, they might be worth an outside shot for that particular competition next season, if you like a bet. What does the future hold then? Villa fans have been starved of success for years now. If they can keep hold of their bigger players, as well as their boss, there's no reason why they can't build and enjoy a sustained period of success. That starts with securing European football next season, which looks very likely at this point. If NSWE back Emery this summer, then you might just be hearing that brummy twang a little louder at stadiums up and down the country next season. As usual, thanks for dropping in on us today, and remember to hit that like and subscribe. And why not share this video with any Villa fans you have on those socials too. Bye guys.